So I'd be interested to know how many of you actually knew that Kemi Badenoch was giving a big speech yesterday if you did not watch my video about it. Because I can guarantee you a lot of you might not even have known about it. And indeed, the only press coverage that came about it was that, oh, Badenoch now blamed her own party for Brexit. Like, that was it. That was the only media coverage. You know, there was more media coverage for Starmer going to Ukraine and being in, Ukraine and Kiev, in Kiev with Zelensky. It wasn't very good. Not only that, I will tell you this: if you go to the Conservatives YouTube channel and have a look at that speech where they live streamed it, yeah, the comments aren't that good. Yes, there's a lot of sycophantic Kemi Badenoch supporters going, "Oh, lovely speech, Kemi, lovely speech," but there's also plenty of other comments disparaging it, saying, "What a load of waffle! You've basically said something, but you have said nothing about policies or what you intend to do to improve that situation," which is what I've been saying about Kemi Badenoch since the beginning, that she's all style, no substance. And guess who also agrees? The vast majority of people on Conservative Home. Because when they covered that speech, when they sort of posted up the transcript, as you well know, the comments in Conservative Home are, from Conservatives, they're not good. They are not good. They are not good at all. And in particular, when we have Will still engaging in his conservative pre-midlife crisis about this speech, which we'll be getting into in a moment. Yeah, this does not look good for Badenoch. This does not look good for her at all. There's already a whispering campaign going on, and we know there's a whispering campaign going on because already you can hear people going, "Gee, that speech was terrible she gave yesterday." And yet, and I will say to this now, some of those whispers are, of course, malicious because, Robert Jerrick's behind them. But I'll say this to the Robert Jerrick supporters in the Conservative, party. What makes you think Robert Jerrick would be any better than Kemi Badenoch? He would be exactly the same. Exactly the same. But let's go on and have a look at, like I say, Will's continuing pre-conservative midlife crisis, because it just gets ever and ever more funny. And you'd think maybe at that point you might want to, I don't know, reevaluate your political leanings and see which party Will actually belongs to. Because I think if he actually did that, he probably wouldn't be a conservative. I wouldn't know which party he would go to or gravitate to, but I don't think Will's a conservative anymore. I think in Will's heart of hearts, he is not a conservative. I think he gave that up a long time ago. Like I say, you're going to see that a bit today. So before we do get going on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there's the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link, and of course, there's the YouTube thank you button and the Pony Club as well. So as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. So let's crack on then into this. So this comes from Conservative Home, from our favorite T-boy, Will Atkinson. Does Badenoch realize just how much trouble our party is in? So let's crack on then into this. Yesterday, Kemi Badenoch made a speech, competing, of course, with a prime ministerial visit to Ukraine, Yvette Cooper's announcement of a specific and limited local rape gang inquiries, and of course the unraveling now ceasefire in the Middle East, speculation over Suella Braverman's future, and of course, the death of one of my girlfriend's favourite directors, and less attentive readers may have even missed it. So if you can either watch it here or read it there. And like I say, it wasn't a very good speech. It was all style, no substance. And even if you do look at the style and try to extract some meaningful stuff out of it, you come to sort of very one conclusion because she did, of course, blame Brexit, or should I say, blame her past Conservatives for Brexit or having no plan about Brexit, which begs the question even more about why then wasn't there a proper or allowed there to be a proper conversation about Brexit? And then if there maybe had been a proper conversation of Brexit, would we be here now? Don't think we would be. So, Will continues. Badenoch had 3 tasks with this speech. First, to reset now her struggling leadership amid now a growing chorus suggesting that she is failing. To show the public that she actually understands why they booted her out of government so spectacularly 6 months ago, and convey that she has a plan to blunt reforms rise and prevent our party from being pushed into third and electoral oblivion. Those are her tasks. And if you were to say, if those are a task and you watch a speech or you read a speech, it doesn't really set out any ideas how she intends to do that. Nothing at all. So, readers, he continues with, at Conservative Home, we are, of course, critical friends of the Tories. We have no set editorial view, only guidelines when writing are our consensus, our interests, and of course, that line has now defined our role for the last 20 years. We are independent of, but supportive of the Conservative Party. I've been a party member since I was 15, and the Tory since I could think. I want us to win. And I think if you've been again, let's be nice. Maybe Will grew up in a conservative household. Maybe that's all he's ever known in that sort of particular thought process. Maybe if you were starting to think that, and you're having as he gets on to later these ideas, maybe then you aren't as conservative as you think. Maybe you aren't as supportive of your party as you could think. Maybe you're not as blue as Will thinks he is. Which is again why I keep on saying he's going through some sort of, Tory midlife crisis. Anyway, he continues with these hardest articles are, of course, to write about. When I do feel that I have now driven now to suppress my own feelings, blunt my criticisms, or even pander to those with more power in this party than myself. Really? Hardest articles to pander to those with more power than yourself and your party. That feels like you yourself are not telling the truth or haven't been telling the truth in other articles that Will has written for some time. And indeed, that's quite an odd admission to say that, because that doesn't mean that Will has been open and honest about his criticisms, maybe not even of his own party, or even other articles he's written himself. Like I say, he's definitely going through some sort of, midlife Tory crisis here. But Badenoch, of course, had made it clear very much in her speech, the best thing we can do is to tell the truth. And I will now follow her lead and be honest. She has failed on all 3 of those jobs. And I will agree, I will say why she has. But Will, of course, is coming from this from a differently complete angle, which is why I say we go to Conservative Home so much, because you get to see their thought process on this. So let's see where Will's thought process as to why he is saying and what the Conservative view seems to be and the consensus is of why Kemi Badenoch is failing on this. So, if saying this now irritates her biggest supporters and opens me to charges now of disloyalty or divisiveness, or is now held against me in a future quest for a quasi-mythical safe seat, then so be it. Again, writing for Conservative Home because maybe you want to be a future Conservative MP. Well, mm, again, there you go. But this speech, of course, encapsulated everything that seems to be misfiring about her leadership, down to the very sharp replies, even at the Q&A, that now threatened to overshadow the whole occasion. And oh boy, I need to do a video just on that Q&A session itself. The Q&A session, yeah, Badenoch cannot engage with the press. And if she cannot engage with the press, how can she ever go walkabout with the British public? Like, if you thought the questions from the press were hard, what would she be like going out into the wild, speaking to the average British public, if that's a reply to the press? She can't. She can't ever go and talk out with like, average people at all. It's just too dangerous. But back to this. So, at best, she did provide a coherent critique of Labour's failings. Again, I wouldn't say it was even coherent or even a critique, to be honest, because everything she was critiquing very much were her own problems, her own party's problems. But there you go. Anyway, Will continues. And of course, it was very clear outline for Britain's now structural difficulties. At worst, it did seem now to prolong the exercise in failing to offer a view of anything new or to even engage voters. The general gist was that however bad the last government was, the new one is now worse. And that Labour now lack a plan is now helpful, is a distraction now for the absence of our own one. Labour do have a plan. They've been getting on with it. This time last year, there were 4 bills in Parliament. There's now over 100. Who has a plan? who has a plan here, guys? Anyway, Badenoch now remains committed now to not announcing anything new for the foreseeable future. So her speech concluded now with very familiar elements. The exaltations to, quote, tell the truth in the spirit of Thomas Soswell. The broad view of a various long-standing national problems like the productivity and housing tales of woe from her own McDonald's days, and of course a promise of change under her leadership. Again, why are those problems so long? You've had a very long-term government, 14 years. Her party was in control, and it was not that too long ago they were in power, and she was at the center of it. It's like she was a minister in government. If these are all problems that she has identified or are saying now, why then was she not doing anything about those problems when she was in government? This is just how bad her speech was. And Will can't say that because, again, it would mean attacking, the previous Labour government, the previous Conservative government, and he loves the previous, Conservative government. If you remember reading all the exaltations of that particular government at the time. So, leaving aside that the latter was, of course, nicked from Labour's election campaign in the absence now of fresh content, the speech did serve to point out various things going wrong with Britain, a country that she was part of now governing only 6 months ago without providing any remedies. I'm not asking for a 100-page policy paper, but a similar, at least, hint of what she would do differently. Yeah, and she hasn't done that. She's not going to do that because the second she does that, the party factions, the infighting will just open up again. That's why she's not doing it. As such, Will continues, it was very redundant on the issues where trust in our party has collapsed. Despite the cry of no ifs, no buts, his section on immigration only amounted to a general disdain for high numbers and calls for more integration. With no clear apology for the Boris wave, the NHS was only mentioned via her campaign to ban puberty blockers. Waiting lists? What waiting lists? Yep. Doesn't even care about the NHS. Instead, more focusing on puberty blockers. Again, culture war has melted her brain because that's all she was good at. Badenoch now had more, of course, to say, at least on living standards, saying that we are getting poorer. She strikingly began saying that even high taxes or even worse services, a quote shrinking group of people working to support an ever-growing number of people of those now who are unable or unwilling to work, sky-high energy costs from vulnerable suppliers, unaffordable housing, and an unsustainable debt pile. Well, as Will said, you were in control just a couple of months ago. Why did your government do nothing about that? Where are your answers now to do something about that? You don't have any. Anyway, this led now to a quote helpful, and I will say, I think Will should definitely be putting helpful in there. A litany now, of course, of Labour's woes. Higher mortgages, jobs destroying taxation policies, businesses treated as a cash machine, and a burden to be tolerated rather than celebrated. Aiding, of course, the calling out Bridget Phillipson's pandering now to the unions as the vandalism that it is. Badenoch was at least sharp in hammering home just how trust in Labour is breaking down. But here's the thing with those pay rises, those unions had a point asking for those pay rises. Many of those people in those positions haven't had pay rises for years. They are now happy. Remember, it was not that too long ago where you had barristers and prosecutors threatening to go on strike under the Conservative government, the last Conservative government. People forget that. They've now got a pay rise. They got a pay rise because of Labour. Conservatives weren't going to do anything about that. You would have had a barrister strike, the first such strike to happen, I think, in this country in decades, if not ever before. Because they just were not funding public services. To fund public services, that means you've got to pay people to do it. If you're not paying people to do it, why are people going to work in public services? Anyway, she then explained how Labour are, of course, making the same mistakes that we did, announcing big ambitions without a policy or a strategy to make them work. Except they have policy to do that, but there you go. But of course, that meant trotting now through the litany of Tory cock-ups, launching Brexit without settling how to use their new freedoms, backing net zero based on a back of a fag packet calculations or its costs, and now the hopeless addiction to human quantitative easing. You still haven't got a plan how to solve those problems either. Why is there a difference between now and saying, vote for us because we still won't solve any of these problems if we ever get in 2030? So none of these were, of course, unreasonable, but they are now statements of the obvious, aimed at trying more than just tickling the Telegraph readers' bellies, and of course, engaging now with the 7 million who abandoned us back in July. Does Badenoch actually understand how hated we are? No, she doesn't, Will. No, she doesn't. She must now go beyond the milquetoast criticisms of the government in which she served by offering now a meaningful denunciation and apology. Again, she won't do that. She will not do that because, oh boy, do you think all those people that she is denouncing and apologizing on behalf for are going to remain quiet? I don't think so. That is just opening the door more and more to Tory civil war because that is where they are heading. That is what they really need to go through, and that's what needs to happen. And like I say, I'm all there for that because that will be fun to watch. Um, but as Rachel Cliflin has now highlighted, Badenoch is now held back by an unwillingness to personally apologize. She claimed the quote, difference between me and Keir Starmer is that he doesn't believe he has ever made a mistake. But will she actually acknowledge that the Conservative Party has made mistakes? Note there what Clough labels the rhetorical sleight of hand and the switch from first to third person. Badenoch is very happy to blame her party, but she is unwilling, as a lady who is physically incapable of making gaffes, that she was, of course, complicit in them. That now robs any mea culpa of the impact that she might have hoped for. When she spoke now of her own record, it was only of her victories in standing up to quote postmasters or deploying her own common sense against trans extremists. And Will's right there. That is not a very good record. That is a terrible record um, for that. She can't. She hasn't. It was yet another. The longest non-apology we have seen yet from the Conservatives. Longest non-apology yet we've seen from the Conservatives. I'll agree with them on that. Rather, of course, of making it clear that the Conservative Party is now under new leadership, Badenoch came across as continuity Sunak. Ooh, visually, Will has just pretty much um, not only sharpened the knife, uh, but he is really gone for the jugular with by saying that. Oof, that is oof. Continuity Sunak. Oof. Like I say, this speech has not gone over well, and you can tell by how Will's reacted. Like I say, the comments below this agree with Will that it speech was not good. If you look at the comments below the YouTube stuff, again, most of them not good, not responding to it well. um, so Will continues. Her speech, of course, mostly reminded me of his conference address back in 2003, sorry, 2023, when he complained about the failings of his predecessors. At least he had a few policies to announce. Underwhelming as they were, when he spoke of change, at least he could point to something. And yeah, those policies, how well were those going across with the rest of the party? What happened to those? Oh yeah, they absolutely got ripped to shreds because they were just absolutely destroying them. So, to misquote, of course, Margaret Thatcher, if you have to tell the people that you're in charge, you're not. This is not 1975. Badenoch almost seems frustrated by how badly Labour are doing, since it robs her of the 2 years of sitting back and now writing stepping stones to which she feels that she is entitled. But time is one of the things that she really does not have. Does she realize the existential threat that we now face? And I love this hand wringing that has gone on in the right wing press that Labour are just absolutely um, doing awful and terrible. They're not actually doing that bad. I've said before, yeah, that they're making mistakes, but no government is perfect. But they've done a lot of good things as well, just in 6 months. You know, oh, the economy is failing. Well, if the economy is failing that bad, why did inflation go down? Not a lot of the right-wing press mentioned that happened. No, instead, they were saying, "Oh, Starmer's about to get rid of Rachel Reeves." Again, not happening. Not happening anytime soon. Anyway, back to Will's own dread of this existential threat. Thatcher, he continues, did not become leader after our worst ever result. And you might be wondering why Will's bringing up Thatcher here, because I might have to explain this. A lot of Kemi Badenoch supporters, are comparing her to Margaret Thatcher. A lot of people are comparing her to Margaret Thatcher. And I've said before, I don't like Margaret Thatcher. I think she did a lot of damage to this country. But I'll tell you what, Margaret Thatcher had more political acumen in her little pinky finger than Kemi Badenoch does. So, she was, of course, not pushed now into a third by another party within 3 months. Does Badenoch actually get that if the public they hate Labour, they hate us more, and that the beneficiary of this will be reform? What about the Lib Dems? Every single time, oh no, the beneficiary is going to be reform. What? There's the Lib Dems there. We'll see what happens when it comes to these May elections. I think they're going to be potentially one of the biggest beneficiaries of your downfall. And of course, the biggest beneficiary of this will be reform. Does she realise that there is currently more chance of her being Nigel Farage's future deputy than her occupying number 10 in her own right? Again, worrying, of course, so much about reform and Nigel Farage, they cannot see the yellow tiger stalking behind them. Very, very much so. Because the Lib Dems don't have to rely on Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has to keep up this act for the next couple of years. That is impossible. We've covered the problems already mounting in his own party. Do you think Nigel Farage can keep this going for that long? No, he can't. Because he is in a spotlight that he's never been before. He's an MP. So there is a stage he cannot escape, where previously he could. Meanwhile, Ed Davey, if something happens to Ed Davey, someone else will take over at the Lib Dems. And they will continue on that, on their mission. They're not relying solely on Ed Davey to do this. Reform are entirely relying on Nigel Farage to carry them into number 10. I don't think he can keep that up, given the fact and the stuff that we've covered going on, behind the scenes in reform. The cracks are already appearing there. So, back to this. Will continues. For all the boasts, of course, about her McDonald's workload, Badenoch now appears very uncommitted to the hard work of her leadership. Robert Jenrick, Rupert Lowe, and Farage all seem far more excited about taking the fight to Labour. Again, Robert Jenrick, really? Robert Jenrick would not be in as good a position either. Like, remember, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are from the same side of the party. Like, Robert Jenrick would not be doing a good job either. If he had won, yeah, no, forget it. He ain't doing a good job either. You think those quotes he made a couple of weeks ago? Oh no, there would be. Bear in mind, there were already Tories turning around saying that Badenoch should, slapping his wrist for making those comments. If he was the Tory leader, there would be a lot of other Conservatives saying you weren't fit to be leader. So bear in mind, he wouldn't be winning the popularity contest either. So if voters at least have noticed Badenoch, one would suspect that it would have been far more for her one-woman war on sandwiches or now her futile fight with Farage over memberships. Yeah. No one's interested in listening to them. No one is interested in listening to them at the moment. Like, someone asked me very recently, like, what should they be doing? Right now, what Kemi Badenoch should be doing is having an internal review, sorting out a party, looking at policies and what they're going to do. But that means, as I've said before, looking in the mirror and generally looking into it and having a good self-examination and having a like introspective look at what went wrong. The party, that how the UK has changed fundamentally. Because one of the big things that they really should notice is that the UK has left the Tories behind. It's not the other way around. Not the Tories have left the UK behind. It's now the UK has left the Tories behind. Very, very, very much so on a whole range of issues. And they cannot dare not look in the mirror because they have been so ideologically fixed on this free market fundamentalism for so long, they daren't look away because they might not like the reflection that looks back at them. Until then, Lib Dems are going to reap massive benefits for it. So, Will continues. I would hate to be so gloomy. It's not the first. I wouldn't say this is gloomy. This is more than gloomy. This is very much doom writing. This Will. This is very much doom writing. I would rather, of course, provide readers with an honest assessment than pretend yesterday's speech was a success. Badenoch did have at least one win yesterday, the announcement of at least the partial rape gangs inquiry. She successfully put pressure on Starmer with her amendment. Again, that amendment, if it had passed, would have destroyed the the entire sort of bill that was going to go through. You know, again, and this again partial thing that's been done at a local level. It's what was going to happen anyway. It's not a victory. It is not a victory, Will. It was not her that put pressure on Starmer or Elon Musk or anything like that. So it was not a win. You're making it out to be there, Will. So a few more wins like this, and then the public might actually start to respect Badenoch's ability to put pressure on the government, even without the limited parliamentary resources that she possesses. Again, that inquiry is going to happen anyway. It's happening at a local level. This wasn't, and then all that happened because of really, if you want to talk about pressure, what about all that pressure that Elon Musk, Kemi Badenoch jumped on a bandwagon? And as I've said before, it looks awful. It looks awful that you now only care about this subject when in government, not that too long ago, when 2 years ago you had this big review and you did nothing about it. And you have never spoken out about any of these matters, these crimes, or even these victims. It is political opportunity in its most nakedness. And everyone has seen that. So her best asset now is that she remains, of course, an unknown quality to many voters. But when voters start to actually know who she is, voters aren't going to like her anymore. She's at least now the chance to at least learn from some friendly critiques and to start now trying and cut through with voters on other issues that, of course, matter. Doing so will require that she put herself out there more. She needs to be in the public, in the media as much as possible. She doesn't. Will's not bringing up that Q&A. And I thought you were being honest, Will, because that Q&A that she did was very bad. Very bad indeed. And if she meets the public, do you think she's going to come across to them like that? Oh, no. Oh, no. As I said at the beginning, that is a disaster waiting to happen. If you thought Sunak was bad, wait until you see Kemi Badenoch. So, Will continues. More GB News, more BBC Breakfast, more social media, columns attacking Labour, and now offering alternatives every other day. But she hasn't offered any alternatives. She hasn't got any policy. These are the ways that she will get noticed. She should, of course, make a big speech on the NHS as soon as possible, like her one on immigration last month. Again, immigration one didn't cut through either. If she's going to make one on the NHS, who is in power for the NHS to be in such a position that it is in now that Labour is having to deal with the fallout of this? It's Conservative policies that have put the NHS into its current position, into its current state. She makes a speech on the NHS, it better be, yeah, we're pretty much responsible for all the, catastrophe the NHS is in. Yeah, we're sorry about that. If that's not the speech that she wants to give on the NHS, I doubtful she could even give a speech on the NHS. Let's face it on that one. So Will finishes off with this. If she doesn't, the whispering campaign against her leadership will now steadily grow louder. I've only just turned 25, and I already have now lived through enough and covered far too many Tory leadership contests. Our sixth leader in 8 years must, of course, be given a fair hearing. But that also means that we should be honest about where she goes wrong. Our party's plight is now far too dire not to be. Yeah. And of course, Kemi supporters have not been too charitable about this. So, with someone said, well, now it's official. Will Atkinson at Conservative Home and others will continue to write snippy pieces about Kemi Badenoch solely because their candidate, Robert Jerrick, did not win the leadership battle. Again, where's some of the other good ones? Someone else brings up an interesting point here. Badenoch argues for a means-tested triple lock state pension, and yet now accuses Labour of not giving away the winter fuel payment. The triple lock pension is worth and far more generous than any winter fuel payment. She has lost her pensioners. Does she not do proper policies? She will be gone in 2 years. As someone else says here, the UK has just had an election and the people are not paying attention to politics. The Tories will not win the next general election. Labour will lose it. And Farage and Reform can promise the sky, but what is it that he is exactly going to do about Clacton/Blackpool? Make Spanish vacations illegal? There is nothing the UK government can do about Ukraine. I disagree with that. Or Gaza. Trump will do what Trump will do. Demographic pressures plus low productivity will put pressure on the budget. Migration is going to be explosive either way. Rich democracies do not change unless they are forced to. Maggie could at least bank on the North Sea money to lubricate her reforms. The Tories like to forget that this is a very small detail, and of course, the next government will not have that luxury. So yeah, already the turning against her so quickly. People go, oh, but people, look at the polls against Keir Starmer. Have you seen the polls of Conservatives against Kemi Badenoch? What they're saying about her on here? What we've covered? Someone else here. Yeah. Kemi is now slipping due to a number of factors, but her main failure is that the party now remains fundamentally split into Lib Dems and the traditional Tory right. Unless that is resolved, she cannot have any meaningful policy. And if she does so, we believe that they will not be fit for government because they will either now compromise so much as to appeal that neither nor or one side actually wins the policy debate. The other side will now sabotage it in government, causing exactly what we saw in the last parliament. Again, he's sort of right on that. I've talked about this before, how split ideologically is, but it's not Lib Dems to traditional Tory right. That's for sure. Someone else here, perhaps Condom editorial could actually offer some policy ideas. To which someone replied, "The Tories had 14 years. What policy? What policies do you want?" Um, Someone else says, "Yeah, the simple answer is no, she doesn't. There is just something so superficial about Kemi. There is no actual deep analysis of the multiple problems that this country now faces." Someone else says, "Yeah, not having a growth plan is a bit like saying that we would have won the last World Cup if we had the right team. It lacks answers in there, but now it does not now substantially explain, of course, the problem. It does confirm that Brexit was about policies, not the economy, when it should have been about both." Um, then, of course, a Brexit argument breaks out here. Someone saying, "No, Brexit was a success. Just be it with some, unfinished business." Um, what a disaster was the Tories now randomly without reason giving the EU as much as it could, to which someone who said, "Observe, we've just not tried real communism." Which again, does feel like that. We've all been there. We've all seen those arguments. Um, so yeah, this is once again, you know, people keep on saying, in the media, "Oh, Keir Starmer's got problems." He's gonna lose it. No, he's not. There's no serious internal division in the Labour Party. No one's clamoring to get rid of him. There's no internal clamoring to get rid of Rachel Reeves. But Kemi Badenoch, on the other hand, party is split, divided. There's already whispering campaigns to get rid of her. She hasn't got any policies. She hasn't got any plans. She delivered this awful speech, where again she quote took responsibility and apologized, but she didn't. Again, raises more questions about the future of her leadership. Like I say, she won't be leading the Conservatives into the next general election. When she will go, who knows? But to say that it's already this bad, she might not even last the year. But we'll see. As always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, click the share button on your way out. And of course, we'll see you all next time.